In 1978, the Rebbe had a major heart attack on Shmini Atzeres at night after the dancing. And then Simchas Torah, he was in his room, and he said that, when he hears the Hasidim dancing, it gives him life. He didn't come out of his room. Matzai Simchas Torah, after Simchas Torah, he said a mimer on a loudspeaker. And something I never realized before. He spoke about what the idea of Simchas Torah is, but the Rebbe mentioned this midrash, and he said, really, Simchas Torah should be 50 days after Yom Kippur. That's what it says in the ancient midrash. But God didn't want to do it because of the rain, and he knew that only the people who were close would come back 50 days after, but the people who live far away, it would be too difficult because it's the rainy season. Now, when did the Rebbe recover fully from his heart attack and leave the hospital bed? 50 days after Yom Kippur. And I just couldn't help but realize the day the Rebbe, and what did the Hasidim do? They kind of celebrated Simchas Torah because the Rebbe had not been out for Simchas Torah, had missed Simchas Torah, and they had missed the Rebbe's Simchas Torah.
So it coincided with the 50th
and
day.
50th day, exactly the 50th day, the Rebbe came out, that was when the doctors finally released him. So it was kind of an interesting thing that I saw there. I never realized that before because this is right after the heart attack. I mean, this is probably 48 hours after the heart attack. The Rebbe speaking, because the Rebbe was in his office. They set up a hospital room in his office, and they set up a speaker system so he could deliver addresses to the people in 770. And that was the first address the Rebbe said. He said that really Simchas Torah should be 50 days after, because the rainy season, and 50 days after, that's when the Rebbe returned.
Well, can you say, I can't read, I don't have the vocabulary to do the translation, but can you send me the Hebrew one anyway?
The Hebrew mimer of that?
The one you're talking
Yeah,
about?
I could do that. Now, my split of it is a very long, difficult mimer. Now, there's two mimerim here that I'm mentioning. One of them is the Simchas Torah one, which the Rebbe said, and the other one is the one. So after someone got murdered, everyone was in a really bad mood. It's like we just celebrated the high holidays, and we talk about how it's going to be a good year and we're successful. And so the Rebbe and the mimer there basically spoke about a midrash in Parshas Noach that basically describes that God, it says that Noach gave a sacrifice, and God smelled it, and it was a pleasant smell. That's what it says. And then it says God also smelled the smell of Avraham being thrown into the furnace. We know that Avraham was thrown into the furnace by Nimrod. It's not mentioned, it's hinted in the Torah at the end of Parshas Noach, actually. But it's in the Midrash. The Midrash has a long, the Avram's life until he's about 75 is not really mentioned in the Torah so much. Just very, very alluded to. But he was thrown in the furnace because he was a monotheist and he survived. And actually his brother was also thrown in and his brother didn't survive. That's what the Rashi says at the end of Parshas Noach. Then you have Hanani, Mishael, and Azariah were three people in the time of Nebuchadnezzar. They were also... they were in the time of Daniel and Nebuchadnezzar. Daniel was not there, but those three were thrown into the fire, and they also survived. But God smelled the smell of their sacrifice. And then it says God also smells the sacrifice of the Jewish people in the eras of conversion, coerced conversion. Now, when are the eras of coerced conversion? Some would say pretty much for 2,000 years, because you have, the Crusades, you have the Greeks, the Crusades, the Romans, the Church. You have many, many inquisitions in all regions of the world, not just the famous Inquisition in Spain, many, many inquisitions. And then you have the Protestants in Russia. You just have it again and again and again and again throughout history. Poland, Germany, even in America, some would say that there is somewhat, I remember I read a book on it also, how basically they said that a lot of the Christianity...
Yeah. So the Babylonian exile, 598 BCE, and they attacked Jerusalem in 598 BCE, and then the temple was destroyed and were exiled in 587 BCE. The Romans, 70 CE. Now in Europe, this is interesting.
These are wars when the Jewish people revolted.
This is the history of persecution, wars, expulsion.
So probably, obviously, the most famous, most successful war of the Jewish people, probably in history, was probably the story of Hanukkah.
Right.
If you're looking, they really finished the job fully.
I didn't go into the
Yeah.
detail, but then in the diaspora, 1182, 1264, 1306, 1322, 1359, and 1394.
Wow.
They would throw them out, the Jews out, and then they would readmit them and throw them out again, 6 times. And then, of course, Spanish Inquisition in 1492. I mean,
And there's probably many more than mentioned,
yeah,
because every city, every country in the world had counties and own governors and princes. So there's definitely a lot of expulsions.
those are just the major country, but the city, there were a bunch of German cities in the Middle Ages that expelled the Jews.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's Wikipedia, which is not very good. But I have to find it. There is a Jewish.
Well, Rabbi Beryl Wine, in his history books, is broken. Is it broken fully? It started working? That one's broken? Okay, so I'm going to buy you one later today. All right. The left one doesn't work, but I'm more concerned about the mic. That's what I'm concerned. Is the mic working? Not so well. Okay, we're going to buy a new one today. Yeah. Later today. As soon as I can. I don't know yet. Yeah, his teacher called me yesterday and said, we feel really bad. We can't, his mic isn't working and a lot of times people do not know that, they don't know that, the kid doesn't know that his mic's not working because he hears himself and it's choppy and everything like that. So I have to get him a new headphones. I've learned that you have to go with the very expensive headphones. You want them to last. That's the way it is. But yeah, so anyways, you're saying about Wikipedia.
Yeah, that's not a very good source. And then there are much better sources. I have to pin them down. But I didn't want, there are so many.
Yeah.
Because in the case of the Germans, the cities, there weren't countries. In the medieval times there were city-states. We didn't have formal international boundaries like we do now. And that excludes the Crusades.
Correct.
And all of the little skirmishes, it is, but I'm not trying to be exhaustive. I just want to make a point about how many times in history the Jews have to fight for the land. And on a separate subject, National Geographic has a series on TV called Biblical Cities. And they had a little episode on Babylon and Nineveh. And there are archaeologists in Iraq restoring Babylon, the gates and everything. It was, and in Nineveh too. People, there's just an inadequate appreciation for, even in ancient times, the things that happened to the Jews. But anyway, I just want to make a point about how many times the Jews have had to try to defend themselves. And they did it, against the Romans and in other times. But the Holocaust, I think, sets a different kind of example. And I think people mostly point to the Warsaw Ghetto, the uprising in the Warsaw Ghetto, as, even though in biblical times, the Israelis did fight, the Jews did fight wars, and they did win some wars. But the Holocaust was different because immediately after the Holocaust, in modern times, we had the creation of Israel. And that was the occasion when I think the Jews in the diaspora really began to take pride in being able to protect our own people. And
No, definitely. Well, in the Holocaust, if you read the Holocaust, no one could believe it. No one in the world could believe it until it was too late. And there wasn't any opportunity for unity of uprising. You're talking about small towns. People could not believe, Poland would surrender so fast. No one could believe it. It was so quick that, and so quick and so sneaky. No one could imagine how bad it would get. And I think the Jewish people, many of them learned the lesson from there. They said, well, we can't really trust anyone fully.
so many take the Jews.
Yeah.
And that also contributed to the idea that we have to have our own state, Theodore Herzl and all of that.
Yeah.
And protect it and take pride in it. And it seems to me it's a unifying factor both for Israelis but also the diaspora. In a way, I think because of modern communication and things like that, but also the idea of the Holocaust is something we just...
What do you need? 1 second. You need a pen? Go ask Mendel for one. Mendel has a lot of pens.
Anyway,
Yeah.
it'll take me a little time, but I am...
Yeah, well, so...
I'm going to write this down.
So if you look
the
also...
ideas that I had.
Israel has the law of return for Jewish people. Jewish people always look at Israel as a safe haven that they could go to because, frankly, there aren't... Israel doesn't do a great job with their security, and Israel has their own issues in that, unfortunately. But they have the ability to not do a great job or do a great job. In other words, they're not totally victim of, they make their own decisions, which is important.
Well, I think, there's an attitude in the United States. We have the history of slavery. It's an imperfect union, but we keep trying to make it better. And the same is true with Israel.
Absolutely.
It's run by human beings.
Absolutely.
God does not, we may have divine providence and God may have a plan and all that thing, but it's human beings who have to do it.
Well, I was once...
We're not perfect.
I was once hearing that, so God gives us, the mitzvahs, and we have to follow the mitzvahs, and that's Israel's mitzvah is to secure the Jewish nation. But at the same time, in Europe, people did not necessarily even have the ability to fulfill that mitzvah on a major scale.
Absolutely.
All right. So Trumas Halishka, what do you do with the half shekel? Ma yaseba. What do you do with it? You give a daily you pay for the daily sacrifices and the musaf sacrifices every Shabbos and the holidays and all the other public sacrifices and the salt which you put on all the sacrifices and the wood if you didn't bring wood and you didn't if you didn't bring wood and the incense and the people who you have to pay for it, and all these different, and the bread, the show bread, and the omer, the shtei alechem, these are all the holiday sacrifices, and the red heifer, and the sarya mishtalech is the animal that you throw off the cliff on Yom Kippur, and the lashon shel zahiris, the red tongue of wool all these things, they come from Trumas Halishka. So all these things have to be paid for publicly by public fund of the half shekel. However, let's say the Jewish people make a mistake, the rabbis make a mistake in ruling, or the king, or whatever it is, and they have to give a sacrifice, a communal sacrifice, or for idolatry, that you have to raise a new tax. So there are the kind of like the steady expected things are all paid for from the public fund. New things have to be raised with new money. You can't say like, hey, I already gave money for that. If the Jewish people make a mistake and they sin publicly, then they have to give a communal offering. They make a mistake, and they all have to re-raise the money. The paroiches, the curtains of the temple, of the heichal, those also need to be paid from a different fund. But the paroiches, the curtains of the other halls, they can be paid from this fund. The menorah and all these things, those should come from the leftover funds of people's sacrifices, and we'll explain that later on. What are the Moisar HaNesachim? So there's different types of funds. You have funds of people sponsoring specific things. You have funds of the half shekel, and then you have funds of extra money, which is used, given for certain things. Those funds go to other things. So, also the clothing from the Kohanim, they also come from the half shekels. All the animals in Jerusalem or outside, close to it, they are all. All the animals which are found in Yerushalayim or outside next to it, which are used for olos, as we already explained, they're niskeim. So you have to give a libation sacrifice, a wine libation sacrifice. Along with it, that the libation comes from the Trumas Halishka. Similarly, a Gentile, let's say a Gentile sends an animal and he doesn't give money to pay for the libation, a Gentile can send a sacrifice. So he gives money for an animal, but he doesn't give money for the libation. Then you pay for the libation sacrifice from the Nesachim is the libation, the wine libation you pay comes from this fund. A Gentile, a convert who dies, and he left over sacrifices. If he has money that he left for the libations, then you can use that. And if not, it comes from the Trumas Halishka. A Kohen Gadol, which dies, and you don't have another Kohen under him, you do the sacrifices from this Trumas Halishka. You do it from the half shekels. The people who check for blemishes in Yerushalayim and Torah scholars, which you teach them, which are the ones who are responsible for the Kohanim slaughtering properly, and the teachers who teach the laws of the sacrifices, and the women, so basically, long story short, there was like a whole group of women who would raise children in a special place to do the paraduma offering. They wanted to make sure that it was totally pure, to an extent beyond the necessity of Jewish law, but totally pure. So they would raise kids who would do some of the paraduma work, red heifer work, and those kids would live in cities. So all those expenses are all taken from this. And what do they get paid? Whatever the Beis Din decides. On the year of Shemitah, which is the year of ownerlessness, the Beis Din, they hire guards to go check on things, check on the field where they're going to bring certain sacrifice to make sure that it's all following the laws of Shemitah. Someone who said, I'll do it for free, you don't listen to him, you're worried, maybe people who are strong will give them a hard time, therefore you want to pay security for those things. And therefore the rabbi said that you should take the payment from the lishka in order that that you take the money from that place that they're watching. The people who fix books in Jerusalem, they take from the Trumas Halishka. We're talking about the books that the temple needs. The judges, they take money from Trumas Halishka. And what do they take? They take 90 mana every year. And if it's not enough, even though they don't want, you can give what they need, both for their wives and children. They made a ramp from Har HaBayis to Har HaMishcha. Har HaMishcha is also called Mount of Olives. It's right across the Kidron Valley. So they made a walkway in order to do different services, and and that's where they do different services, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to go through all of them now. And similarly, the altar and all these things, they all come from the leftover of the lishka. The water in Jerusalem, they have this thing of water, and all those things, they come from the Trumas Halishka. A Gentile gives money for these things, or to do them for free, you don't accept from him, even if he is a ger toshav. It has to come for the public fund of the Jewish people. The leftover Trumas Halishka and the leftovers, you can buy extra male animals and give olos. And that is what they would do with the leftover money of the year. You can't use birds, but other animals you could do. Okay, shkalim. If you don't have enough money, let's say there's some years where you have abundance of money, some years where you don't have enough money, you could take money from the Bedek HaBayis. So Bedek HaBayis is the shul fund, the temple fund. If someone wants to give donations of wealth or whatever it is, so you can take from there, but you can't take from the Bedek HaBayis from the holy things. when Rosh Chodesh Nisan comes, you don't do, Rosh Chodesh Nisan comes, it has to be from the New Year's Truma. And if it didn't come new, you could take from the old. Therefore, so they start collecting the shkalim in Adar, and then the next month they have to start sacrificing using for the new year. Therefore, if it came Rosh Chodesh Nisan and you have animals for the daily sacrifice from the old one, what you do is you redeem them and you take them to make them mundane, even though they're complete, and you take the money and so the basic we spoke several times. We said if you make a sacrifice and you don't actually use the animal, right? So what is the law? Right now, there's certain times when you can redeem it. So here you have the rabbis have the daily sacrifice, which they always kept 8 animals in the Temple Mount, 2 to be used every day for the daily sacrifices, the morning one and the mincha, the afternoon one. So what happens is you have Rosh Chodesh Nisan and you have old animals. So what do? Well, the Beis Din made a condition that you can let those go and take the money and buy new ones. Okay, and that's what they would. This is what they would do at the end of the. Let's say they had all the incense. So you have all the incense for the Ketores. So what do you do when Rosh Chodesh Nisan comes? You make them unholy, and then you could take the money from them, sell them, to take the money and buy new ones in order to give it. And if you don't have new ones, you can use the old ones. That's the ends of Hilchos Shkalim. So these are the laws of the public Shkalim tax. The temple had many funds. There was Bedek Habayis is essentially the concept of private donations at people's own free will. Then you have what to do. And every year Nisan, you're supposed to start with new money. Even if you have old money, the old money could be used for other things. You have to start the New Year's sacrifices from new money on behalf of the people.
Yeah, the half shekel is biblical.
Yes, and then you have, we said, there are times also where the Jewish nation will need to give another sacrifice on their behalf or do change something on behalf of their behalf, so that you'll be able to take in donations publicly, and you'll be able to take in donations publicly, and then that can be also, people can give at their will whatever they want to give. And they can even say hey, I'll take care of this for the community or whatever it is. But the half shekel is unique that everyone has to give the same amount, and it's used for the standard public things, holy public things on behalf of the nation. And if they don't have enough, then they can take from private donations. So it's kind of interesting. Now, it doesn't work the other way, that if you have enough private donations, you don't need the half shekel. It works that if you don't have enough half shekels, then you can use private donations. And it's
okay.
All right. If you want, we could start the mimer. Let me just send it to you, and I have it printed upstairs.